Good morning, everyone, and happy Wednesday. Thank you for listening to us wherever you are, whether you're driving, working, cooking, or just taking a moment somewhere quiet. Welcome to another episode of Aligned, Engaged, Fulfilled. On this show, we challenge the status quo of workplace culture and we dive into the work it takes to build transformative and human-centric workplaces where people and purpose drive profits, not the other way around. I'm your host, Clarence Moore, and today we're deconstructing one of the most critical relationships in modern business, the link between the customer experience, or CX, and the employee experience, or EX. We're joined by two exceptional consultants who approach this from unique and complementary angles. Manasi Shukla is the founder of Safrela Consulting and a specialist in strategic customer education. With over 20 years in the high-stakes world of healthcare and tech, she architects the training and onboarding programs that ensure customers are successful, engaged, and empowered. Natalie Jackson is the founder of Crescent Consultancy and an expert in optimizing end-to-end customer and employee journeys. Her work is rooted in the powerful belief that a world-class customer experience is a direct result of a world-class employee experience. Our central argument for today's episode is a provocative one. What if your most important customer isn't the one buying your product, but the one building, selling, and supporting it? We're going to explore why your employee is your primary customer and how investing in their experience first and foremost is the ultimate driver of growth. Good morning, Manasi and Natalie, and welcome to the show. I'm so excited to have you both for this discussion.
Thank you for having me.
So before we dive in, I want to start with something that I found on your website, Natalie, that I think perfectly captures the essence of our conversation today. You wrote, and I quote, "We hear leaders facing these real-world challenges. Who are we really serving? We need a clear picture of our customers. We need our teams to provide exceptional service that reflects our brand values. We gather customer data, but how do we translate it into effective actions? Our customers expect a seamless experience, but we're noticing gaps and inconsistencies." And that's a perfect snapshot of the modern customer dilemma. But the core of what we're going to discuss today is a powerful shift that I'm seeing. If you read that list again, every single one of those challenges now applies directly to employees. We're in a new era where our teams are behaving more and more like our customers. They're more vocal about their experience. They're less tolerant of poor treatment, and they're quicker to switch brands, or in this case, jobs, when they're unhappy. And their expectations for ethical practice and purpose are higher than ever. So the lines between employee experience and the customer experience are blurring into what is simply the total brand experience. Companies have historically obsessed over customer service, but those who fail to give equal, if not more, attention to employee service are facing unprecedented challenges with recruitment and retention. So that was a long monologue, but to kick the conversation off, I want to define these two worlds that are now colliding. To level set for our listeners, let's start with the foundational terms. Manasi, your work is deeply focused on CX. So in your world, what does customer experience truly mean?
I deal with a lot of products and services. And so what that means is what type of experience is the customer having with the product and the company? And that goes all the way from when they sign that deal or when they subscribe, all the way to when they're raving fans. And part of that journey and as sort of that training journey is also, to your point, thinking about the employees that are supporting those customers. Because if the employees are not aligned, then the customer will not understand how they can maximize use of that product or service. And so what I'm doing in my work is helping companies bridge that gap and in thinking about the customer and their training journey, but at the same time, using that as an opportunity to align internally on how they can then support the customer.
Natalie, you are also in the world of CX, obviously, but you highlight a little bit more of the EX piece in your approach to how you solve this problem. So, in your approach to connecting CX to the internal world of a company, how do you define employee experience or EX?
Yeah. Well, I often come in with the education on CX. So I'll ask them, what's your brand promise and how are you activating and showing up that brand across the entire journey? And then I kind of bring everyone along and say, okay, for the employees, does everyone understand what that promise is? And then how does that translate into giving us a North Star and experience anchors, I'll call them, on how they show up for each other, but also for the customer, knowing there are different nuances there. And then we build out behaviors. So I would translate that to answer your question, what's employee experience? It's every single touch point across the entire journey, from every moment, from recruiting all the way through to onboarding, to being there, to showing up and, hopefully thriving in your role and getting promoted and feeling fulfilled and enriched, to telling all your friends that they should also work there too.
I think that that sets a perfect foundation. So we have CX, which, in essence is focused externally. And then we have EX, which is focused internally. In my work, I argue that the full brand experience isn't just about the alignment of those two,
Mhm.
but really in the inward to outward execution of them. And, based on our conversations last time, you guys share a very similar philosophy
Mhm.
in that regard. So this leads me to a core belief that I want to explore today, which is that a company's primary customer is actually its employees. And I'd like to get your reactions on that statement. And Natalie, let's start with you. What do you think about that notion?
I love that notion. When even just in prior conversations, I have to almost put a different hat on because it's so pivotal for me in educating that the customers are at the center. So it took me a minute to say it that way, but then I had the ahas of, well, of course, you want to represent your brand out there. You want to recruit, attract the right talent that feels connected to your values. You want to make sure you're actually displaying and showing up that way. So you promise something over here. Does it really feel like that? Do you really feel
Mm,
heard? And do you feel that you belong and you have a voice and whatever those things are that matter to you? And that is, I think, that was my aha to say these actually do go together. And you have your own journey as your employee and you're
yeah.
going to spend a whole lot of time there. So you really need to like where you are and believe what you're doing.
Yeah, 100%. And I love those aha moments. And I will say I've had more of those aha moments after I went into consulting than at any point in my career. So
Yeah.
we love those moments.
Mhm.
Monsi, what does that idea, the employee as a primary customer, mean to you as someone who builds the educational bridge between a company and its users?
Yeah, no, that's a great point. What I found interesting is in my work, I've come from a med device background, so I was very focused on externally, on focusing on customers, on what their training looks like. But more recently, some of the projects that I've worked on have actually been for employee onboarding and streamlining their
Mm,
process. And with a lot of companies going remote first, what I found is how do you, the sort of the training and onboarding comes into the internal teams is when you have these remote first teams, how are you going to onboard them? How are you going to talk to them about educate them on the product, but
mm,
also in addition to that, give them the feel of the company because now you're not in the office together. And so you
mm,
don't have those one-on-one conversations. And actually recently, some of the projects that I've worked on have actually been focused on internal team training and building out onboarding for them. So thinking through exactly what I would have done for the customer before, but now for the internal teams. And sort of they, as you said, Clarence, becoming the customer. So we want to make sure that they're engaged and they're learning about the product and the company culture and excited to then truly understand where they fit into like the whole
yeah.
puzzle of all of the pieces of the company so that they can then show up and support the customer.
Yeah, I love that you bring up kind of the this dynamic between the in-person kind of environment and then the remote. So tell me a little bit more about that. Like what's the differences that you're seeing and how you're implementing this for more of that remote environment versus the in-person?
So in person, it traditionally has always been live training. It's been in a room. where you're sitting with some leader who's then going through all of this training with you. And then you will have a mentor who you'll like job shadow, and you'll follow them and learn more about the company culture. There hasn't been as much focus on, oh, like here's a handbook, read it, giving them time to go through sort of learning at their own pace. But now with this remote first culture, there's a lot more emphasis on self-paced learning, and also kind of giving them information up front in a strategic way so that they don't feel overwhelmed, but yet they still get that information that's important for them to know, which is a mix now of company culture but also their role, about the product. There's a lot of different elements to what now needs to be taught to them. And so then the challenge becomes, how do you give them the information without overwhelming them? What do they need to know first? Time-wise, like what are all the expectations? How are you going to set up a mentor? So building out that training journey becomes even more important than it did before.
So I want to pull on a thread because you said the word culture quite a bit in that response. And so I want to run with this idea that if an employee is a customer, then the product that they're buying is their role in the company culture. And so I want to introduce a parallel that I believe is at the heart of this conversation today, which is that in every business, we have this obsession with achieving product market fit. Companies spend fortunes on R&D, market research, and customer acquisition to really ensure that their product perfectly meets the market's needs. And it really is the external engine of growth. But there's an internal equivalent that really gets only a fraction of the attention, which is talent company fit. And it's very parallel to product market fit. But talent company fit is the degree to which your people are truly aligned with your culture and your mission. And it is the internal engine. It's the internal equivalent of that external engine. But the imbalance between the two in focus is really staggering, right? Like while companies pour resources into perfecting that external engine, and for a lot of large enterprises, it can be 10 to 15% marketing budget, 10 to 15% of their revenues. And then data from sources like Gallup show that the cost of replacing a single employee due to poor talent company fit can be anywhere from 1 to 3 times their annual salary. So we're meticulously optimizing for the customer, but we're ignoring the people who serve those customers. So with that framework in mind, how does this concept of talent company fit show up in your work? Natalie, we'll start with you, because from a journey mapping perspective, how do you design an employee experience that really actively selects for and nurtures that deep sense of fit right from the very first touch point?
Right. Yeah, I love that concept. And I've seen this work and not work, and be set up and not set up, and people in different levels of maturity and understanding, depending on the leaders. And for your question about how does it fit into journey mapping, it's more in the preparation to get ready for journey mapping. So, for me, I'll take the time to interview all the employees who are impacted by whatever we're working on cross-functionally. And I get to hear a whole lot, right? It's confidential, but themes emerge. And that leads to, actually, we need to get everybody a little bit more focused on X, Y, and Z so that we can show up in a more aligned fashion. And oftentimes, one of the opportunities or the themes that arise are nobody's operating as one team right now cross-functionally, or there's, at odds with each other, or if simple as the technology is not working to enable them, or there's not a clear understanding. I could go on, like the lists are long, but there are themes that emerge from that. And usually it then leads to, well, if we're seeing a misalignment, or if we're seeing those champions of change and champions for getting aligned, or whatever those things are, usually I start asking questions. Well, how did you bring on the team members, and what do you do to align? And sometimes it surfaces, well, we actually do an assessment, beforehand, to make sure that they're showing up with whatever it is for them, if it's empathy or something else. And for other times, well, we've thought of that, and we've had a couple coaches come in. So the conversation, I get to raise my hand and say, I have some experts over here who can help you. Let's just put that pin right here, and we'll come back to it, because we need to assess to get everyone on the right trajectory.
That's powerful. So Mansi, on your side, like your work is about creating world-class customer education. And Natalie kind of introduced this. So what happens to a perfectly designed customer onboarding program when the employees delivering it lack that deep talent company fit? that we've just now been discussing? Like, how critical is the internal alignment of that team to the external success of the customer from your perspective?
Well, extremely. So one of the things that I found is when, HR does their job, they hire the individual and now the individual is ready to go. There's two things that I found in sort of this process. Is there's the tools, like Natalie mentioned, kind of alluded to that. There's what are the tools that are being implemented so that they can then have a positive experience. And then what does the training look like? Are you setting the expectations up front? Are you clear on what their job role is? Are you also similar to what you would do for a customer? If they have questions, do they know where to go to ask for help? And it's really empowering that employee with all of the tools that they need to make sure that they're successful at their job. Because most of the time, companies are great at hiring the right talent. I think where companies fail is in that sort of execution of how to make sure that they then understand the expectations from them, but then also are integrated well into the company for their role, but then also the expectations of the team as well. And so thinking about the right tools and that actual training journey becomes really important.
Yeah. Natalie, is there anything you want to add?
Yeah, well, it just made me think about, my own experiences onboarding at different companies or even getting embedded at client sites and the difference between, going through training to say, this is this is what you need to know versus the complimentary, here's someone who's assigned to you to help you to answer questions, to guide you, and, the tools to go with it. I just had a variety of experiences. So it's nice to hear sort of I don't want to say right way, but what you found to be successful, Muncie.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think also tools play a big part. I worked with a company to actually revamp their employee onboarding. So this was a healthcare company that I worked with, and they were hiring clinicians. There was a huge drop off because something wasn't working. And so when I looked at the onboarding, it really was two things. It was the tools that were being used weren't the ideal tools for those clinicians. And so they weren't quite understanding how to leverage the tool that the onboarding was being delivered in. And then the second piece was setting those expectations and kind of understanding where they fit into the big puzzle and what they're expected to do in order to support the customer. And so when I helped redefine what that training journey looks like, we looked at a different tool to carry out that onboarding, and then we revamped the content, and it was like the perfect mix, and it just changed everything.
Mansa, your background is in healthcare and tech, is that correct?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Do you find that there are significant differences in how you go about delivering a CX solution between those two industries, or do you find that the process and the nuances are very much the same?
I would say it depends on the type of healthcare company. So traditional, for example, SaaS-based companies, everything is online. It's all virtual. It's very much about user acquisition. A lot of the training that's done is sort of expected to be self-paced, lots of in-app tools. And there's sort of like all of these things that are generally implemented in tech type platforms. In healthcare, it depends on the type of companies. So for example, if it's a traditional med device company, that field, because of the type of work and because it's a physical product, you do need sometimes they need hands-on training. So not everything can be done online, and they definitely need a lot more touch points as well. Now, if it's, for example, a digital health product, or if it's a SaaS-based product in healthcare, then you could apply the same principles that you do in tech. So it really depends on, I would say, more like hardware versus software is what I've seen.
Thank you for sharing that. And now, Natalie, I want to pull on something that you kind of introduced. I mean, we've talked a little bit already about this concept of, journey mapping. And you do that, from end to end. Can you, for the listeners who might not be as familiar about what journey mapping is, can you just give us a quick kind of breakdown of what that means and what is the importance and the value of journey mapping?
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Yes. Journey mapping or end-to-end journey mapping is taking a look across as we said, the entire journey from when a customer, or we could translate to an employee, but I'll say, when a customer comes in and learns about your brand, all the way through to when we've talked about onboarding, and once they become a user of your product or service, hopefully grow and advocate. What I do is I will bring cross-functional teams through journey mapping with a particular persona or client overview in mind. If they don't have research-backed personas, we still come up with the best we can to make it approachable. And I guide them through each journey stage aligned to their business. So we align on what those stages are that fit right. If you're a med device company, that's different from a large broker dealer, which is different from someone in renewables, et cetera. That's where all the prep comes in. I listen to everybody and we tailor it, and we put our customer hat on, and I guide them through thinking through what the customer's goals are, how they're feeling in that particular stage when they're learning about you, et cetera. And how much I often fold in effort. How tricky is it to find you or to come on board or whatever that might be. And then we put our company hats back on. And then we talk about our company goals and what metrics we have in place and how we're doing and where there are opportunities and ideas and opportunities surface throughout. But I've, switched to being able to do this pretty effectively virtually, though I do it in person as well.
Okay.
And we cover a ton so that everybody can hear from each other when they're cross-functional handoffs, and we can get a little bit closer to getting ownership across those key stages. It's one of the frameworks that I use to help. It's another hat that someone might use if they're, let's say, in finance or marketing, to say, I own this journey stage, but it's critically important that there's focus once we come out of it. And then that's the early stage format they can use going forward to execute on changes and realign and reorient everybody about what's actually happening outside of their day-to-day, not in silos, not in deep focus mode, but just lift yourself up out of that. And we always try to think outside of our industries too, just to get everybody ready and in a creative space.
So to clarify, because I don't come from the world of CX, so this is not necessarily a concept that I'm super familiar with, but it sounds similar to what I try to educate my clients on in terms of putting the hat on, thinking about that employee journey and kind of the exercises, the steps that they should take with their employees to really get them to, for lack of a better term, buy into the job, buy into the organization. But the way that you described it, that's in the context of the customer's journey. Is that correct?
Yeah, and I can switch it pretty easily and say, the employee journey, when we think end to end, is giving everyone a chance to lift up out of their day-to-day jobs and think through all the stages, from them learning about, where they might join to come in as a full-time employee or contractor or whatever it might be, all the way through to once they get assimilated in the culture and are then empowered to act on behalf of that brand, interact with others, and then hopefully grow their career there. So the exercise would be the same as it would for the customer. We just call those stages something slightly different. And what I will say, no matter what, when we talk about end-to-end journey mapping, I'll tell you what, it's not. It's not process mapping. It's not workflow. And it's meant to be high level, though you can drill down into anything and still go through a similar exercise. And Mansi and I collaborate and talk about that a bit to say, let's drill down into this one area. But the highest level is a great place to start.
Well, I love that. And I think that that's so powerful. And I think it's something that is missing. Like, it's so lacking in the workplace today. But it's more and more needed, as the modern workplace continues to develop and shift. Why do you think, and Mansi, you can answer this too, why do you think that organizations are neglecting to adopt something like this in today's landscape?
You want to go, Natalie? I'll let Natalie answer that, and then I'll give my thoughts.
Right, so many conversations about this. What came to mind first is one, lack of awareness that this is something that is actually helpful to bring people together. They're not sitting in, my seat when I get to see the light bulbs go off and hear somebody say, oh my gosh, I've been in this industry for 20 years and I just learned that. That's a real quote from last week. And I learned something today that I thought that I already knew, or I made these assumptions. So I think that not understanding how powerful it really is, and for those who might know what it is, there are preconceived notions that this is a thing that goes up on the wall that we did that one time with that one consultant. That's not what it is. It's iterative, and you revisit it when you get more data and when you learn. So I think it's misconceptions as the main ones, and then not having central ownership was the other one that came to mind for me. Who owns that experience? If it's employee, is it HR who owns that? Is it talent? Who owns it? It's got to be everybody. Is it all leaders? It should be. So I think there's role clarity that, for me, foundationally is huge for CX and EX.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Monty.
So what I love about what Natalie does is it's giving the company the high level framework. And so when I go in and I start working with companies, I actually look for, hey, have you done a CX journey? Because that's the starting point, because that, like she said, is the North Star to say, hey, we've done this high level work. Because then what I'm doing is when I'm building out these training programs, whether it's for employees or customers, I'm looking for what were the pain points that you found? What's the journey that we want them to go on? Who are the stakeholders? And I'm also using all of that information to actually implement the training. And in my role as well, very similarly, a lot of people don't know that customer education is a thing, that there is someone, then they ask me, well, are you customer success? I'm like, no, customer success is the person that is dealing with the customer. Their job is not to think about the strategy behind the educational content. And I think that's sort of where the miss is, and a lot of companies don't realize that, education is sort of the backbone that's supporting the customer success team, that's supporting the marketing team, the sales teams. Because now, with every product, it's not just about here's a product, it's shiny, go use it. But you have to educate the user, you have to educate the employees, on here's how to use it. You have to give them that blueprint, and that's where customer education comes in. And a lot of companies are just not aware that that's what it is.
It comes back to something that Natalie said, which is that it's a issue of who has ownership over this responsibility. So from your perspective, who should have ownership over the responsibility of implementing something like this?
Monty.
Well, in my role, customer education is actually a role. So going back to the SaaS versus healthcare, customer education in SaaS is quite established, because it's given the environment that we're in SaaS, and it's very tech forward, it's very online based, virtual. So there are a lot of roles in customer education, and sort of generally companies are aware that this role of customer education exists. So there's always a customer education director. Sometimes they have teams that are building out this content and training strategies. But in healthcare, it's still relatively new, because the digital world of healthcare is still also new. So
very much behind.
It's very much behind, and sort of learning to adapt to this remote first digital world, and how do we showcase our product in that. And so not a lot of people in healthcare are aware that customer education is actually a function that's separate from marketing and sales and customer success and product. They work with the other teams, but it is an actual standalone function.
Natalie?
Yeah. When we talk about the ownership over, let's call it the employee experience, my first thought was the culture side of it. Who's in charge of culture? And I know Mansi talked about culture earlier, and I was reflecting back where I've seen a cultural rollout change go well was when they brought in an expert, still had an owner, and took 18 full months, and then continued to monitor and check the pulse check on certain levers. That was a pretty cool thing to be a part of. I didn't lead it, but I was a part of it while I was in-house. That's my first thought, and I am very curious, Clarence, given your perspective and your expertise, where you think it should live. And I have a different answer for CX.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know the answer. I don't think it can be an HR function. And I've had conversations with friends of mine who are in HR, and I think that in today's world, the HR role is just way too complicated, in the sense that the sense of trust from the employees and HR is gone. Like employees are very jaded about the HR role, so I don't think it can come from that function. And we obviously have people roles, and we have like all these different siloed kind of departments, and in many ways it can fall under any, or it can fall under multiple departments, and I think that's part of what makes it difficult, to your point of knowing who has ownership over it. If you ask me, and I think I'm very like biased on this because marketing is my background, but I have a whole theory that leaders of the organization should be marketing leaders, just because of their like interdisciplinary nature, and that their whole kind of foundation to the practice of marketing is very dependent on people and understanding their motivations and understanding their values, and how to take those things and leverage them to get people to take action. So for me, if I were to give you an answer, I think that it falls within marketing to have ownership over this. But again, I could be biased because I'm a marketer by trade.
Right. I kind of love that, though. I mean, it makes sense. It's like a whole toolkit that not everybody knows they have, almost.
Yeah.
Like applying it across the organization.
Yeah. And there's so much more behind kind of that aspect of it from me, because like I fully believe that marketing is the entire organization, right? We're so inundated with this idea of marketing being a department. But when we really talk about marketing, like the difference between big M marketing and little m marketing, like big M marketing is strategic. It's long term. It's really looking at this bigger picture. I think one of the reasons why we've gotten to where we are in terms of how organizations are performing is that we've made them too siloed. Like we've separated branding from marketing, from sales, from CX, and like all these things that really should be under one umbrella, where you're moving forward and taking, you're going stepwise at the same time. I think that's where we need to get back to. So really, most questions that you ask me is going to come back to like, well, I think it should be marketing. But that's that bias.
No, I actually really like that, Clarence, because what I've seen also is like in my work too, I really like marketing is the one that's going out and speaking to the customer and doing the research and finding the pain points and finding the ideal clients and looking at the personas. And so they are already in all of the conversations doing that work, which is the work that I look for also when I'm trying to build out training. And so I can see how marketing is pivotal. And I really like what you said, how these days marketing and branding and everything is so separate. But if you just look at marketing holistically, there's so much more that goes into it.
Thank you. And honestly, I even go as far as to argue that HR should fall under marketing for the same reasons. Like, because like, think about it again, like marketing is so directly tied to leadership and like fundamentally, in the sense that you really have to put in the work to understand people psychographically, to understand like how to move them. And then when we talk about, talent company fit, we should approach it in the same way that we approach product market fit, in the sense that we're putting in the work and the resources to really understand how the individual employee fits within the larger context of the organization. And I think that these are the kind of like, and this is not me trying to toot my horn in any sense, but I think it's the way that we have to like take a step back and kind of change the way that we look at organizational design to just change things, right? Like, and I have like maybe the craziest ideas, because even in one of my like articles, I argue that like the CEO of tomorrow is the CMO. And in the way that historically the CMO has been a strategic advisor to the CEO, in today's modern like business landscape, we need to flip that narrative, have the CMO be the one leading and the CEO being the strategic advisor. And I've talked to people about this and they're like, okay, you're crazy. You're getting out of hand.
I have conversations and I kind of say something similar, although I agree. I say something similar about showing up as an experientially minded leader and, making sure that you're leading with experience, trying not to say it's the customer only or the employee only. And then thinking through, maybe like Mansi was saying too, the entry point for some of our work, and I don't want to speak for you, Mansi, but like our is often through marketing. And then if it's CX
Yeah.
leader, they often are in marketing in some way. That's hopefully elevated and influential and cross-functional enough to make change across the org. But because that CX lives there, so does EX. The employee experience also lives there. And that's a whole lot of pressure if you're siloed to put that over there. So I think that's making the case in a different way, because my conversations are slightly different, but it's a similar place to head.
Yeah. And I think you said it perfectly, that it has to be an experiential minded leader, because that's where the market is going to, that's what, not even going, that's where the market is now. It's very much experiential, and that's what people are responding to. And so our leadership has to adjust and respond to that.
That's right. Now, what is it, Monty? 89% of companies are now competing on experience, given parity in other areas and the expectations that they have. I think it's highlighted in that and in so many of the conversations. And then in the recent news, the Starbucks example is one of my favorite. If I'm having a conversation with someone who isn't as deep in the world of CX and EX, to say, well, have you felt a difference in Starbucks lately? Does it feel different? Are the lines shorter? With Brian Nichols coming in, piggybacking on what was already in place, but just shifting things to more of the coffee house feel. He's notoriously an experientially minded CEO, having grown Chipotle back after some headwinds. Right? Like that's listening to his interviews. It's speaking to a lot of the things that we're talking about today, and listening to those employees who are serving coffee and what changes to make to improve, change, adjust, strategically align things.
Yeah. Well, you say a very, very important word, which is align. And you've brought this up even in your journey mapping. And I think, Monsi, you said this at the very beginning of the episode, but everything that we've talked about so far comes down to alignment, which is the core of the work that I do with my clients, where I really try to break it down to get them to diagnose and understand where the misalignment might be. And I've come to learn that the most successful companies are those where the brand promise that is made to customers is the same as the cultural promise that's made to employees. Natalie, I'll start with you. Like, how do you, and you've touched on this already, but how do you help leaders diagnose and fix that internal external misalignment during times of change or disruption?
Right. No pressure to fix something as massive and critical as that, right? We do tackle it. We do. And one of my favorite things when I'm coming up with different diagnostic tools and ways to say, what should you prioritize? And these are the foundational elements, always comes back to executive leadership, leadership buy-in, leadership alignment, and then visiting what exists today and what we've said already. So starting there and going through and saying, do you have this? Do you feel that this, what are we saying? What are we talking about? Where might there be less buy-in? Who might say, show me, instead of I believe it and I'm living and breathing this and telling my teams every day. So executive buy-in is huge. And then for me, I like to leverage the Disney Institute principles. It's inspired by, but just a way to say, do we have our common purpose? Why are we here? Why are we showing up? Who are we helping? How does that make us feel? And giving the Disney keys, how they do that, right? At the theme park, if you're familiar, a prioritized list of values. So somebody who's at a theme park with a lost child there knows how to show up with safety first, all the way, and efficiency as last of the 5. To me, that's huge to say you're given the time and space. You know how to show up, but it's okay. Just handle what you need to handle. And whatever those words are, I usually help them align around. I was going to say pithy, but that's not the right word, but a succinct phrase to say, here's how we show up for each other based on the culture we have today. And let's translate that into behaviors that we can use in our day-to-day to know how to show up. And that's some of my favorite work. It's so impactful and it takes a lot of listening and some wordsmithing, but I love it because it gives us that jumping off point.
Monty, what Natalie just explained really requires strong leadership to break down the silos that we talked about just a while ago. So from your perspective, Monty, what happens when leadership fails to see customer education as a critical part of a company's growth strategy? What's the role of a leader in championing the idea that investing in the customer's success post-sale isn't a cost center, but one of the most powerful engines for revenue and retention?
That's a great question. And really where they see if customers or if leadership doesn't invest in customer education, there is just lack of product adoption. And what I mean by that is they will see that impact revenue because you won't have sales. The sales will slow down. You won't have those users coming in, or people will sign up and then drop off. And so at the end of the day, it will impact revenue. There was a study that was done by Forrester or Intellim, commissioned a study through Forrester Consulting, and they found that the companies that do invest in customer education, there's a 7.6% increase in annual revenue. So there is a case for the importance of customer education. Because what happens when you are strategic about customer education, there's an intention and, like you mentioned, alignment around everybody working together to support that customer. And when the internal team is working together that support the customer knows where to go. Like what Natalie mentioned, they know the process. Everybody is on the same page. So if we're aligned internally, externally, the customer will feel the same thing. And so that's why. And then what customer education is doing is bringing it all together through training to make sure that the teams understand, but then also the customer has that education that they need to know where to go if they need something.
Yeah. Well, I think that you say something, or you said some words that I think, made me refer back to the conversation earlier of ownership, and who should be responsible for it. And I think based on your explanation of the team role and everybody's responsibility, I do think that it's a responsibility that should fall on anyone on the team who recognizes the problem or who recognizes the need for it. And I know that when we talk about accountability and ownership, that's kind of the antithesis to how we should be responding. But in today's kind of workplace, I think it has to be that. Like, we have to get employees to recognize that the responsibility isn't just on management or on leaders to recognize that and to invite even the beginning of that conversation, because then we become victims to the organizational design of this top-down approach where it can only happen if it comes from the top. But if we want the change to happen, if we want things to get better, we have to, when we recognize it, speak up. And I think not enough leaders are really saying that and calling that out to employees and saying, if you see it, start the conversation.
Yeah,
that could spark the beginning of it, right?
Absolutely. Yeah. Like I'll give you an example. Before I started my consulting business, I worked with a company, a SaaS-based healthcare company, and I was developing all of the educational content, the training. But one of the conversations with customer success and with product was, if you see something, let me know. I can't train someone when I don't have visibility into what the issues are. And so the people in the customer success team, if they saw, for example, a variety of support tickets coming in on a specific topic, that was a flag. Now, they could flag it and just leave it, but to what you mentioned, Clarence, is they realize, hey, we need to do something about it. So they would let the product manager know, and they would let me know. And then it was now a conversation of, okay, is this an issue that's with the product, or is this a training issue? And it allowed us to have that conversation and diagnose it and then implement it so that we were then able to solve it for the customer. But it took that one person in customer success to at least bring it up.
Yeah. Natalie, any thoughts?
Yeah, I feel like that's a perfect example that Manasi gave of maybe the beginning of, or in practice, like the voice of employee type program. Just, recognize, even if it starts as top down, we want to hear from you. Well, then how do you set up all the parts and pieces to make sure that they feel like they can raise their hand, to reinforce that those kinds of changes will actually be made, to show that there's attention on it, to close that loop back, to say, look, we heard you, we did this, and now we're going to also add these other tools to make it better for you. We put more trust in that process, and perhaps you could even advance it to, like psychological safety and certain things. And I don't like this that's happening. It's not always with a tool. It could be something more intense than that, right?
Yeah. There's so much that I want to unpack in all of that between what you and Monty have shared. But we only have an hour to really talk. But I want to bring in kind of a central tenet of my philosophy that I think anchors everything that we've talked about so far for anybody who's listening who might be struggling to follow the conversation or having difficulty connecting what we've shared so far. The central tenet of my philosophy is that people are the ultimate anchor to achieving the outcomes that we all want, which is alignment, engagement, and fulfillment. Hence the name of the podcast. So everything from the company strategy to its brand hinges on the people. And that's whether it's the people inside, your employees, or the people outside, your customers. So I'd love for each of you to speak more on how your specific work serves as that anchor. So Natalie, for you, and we've touched on this a little bit already earlier, but you design entire journeys. How does creating a seamless and purposeful journey for an employee anchor them in their role, leading to deeper engagement and fulfillment in their role?
Yeah, I have found that the work that I do, it brings a sense of clarity. It clears up some things that, maybe there were preconceived notions or someone not feeling like they have a voice or what's happening over there on the other side of the fence. I don't know. It lets everybody pause, not for very long, but pause and take a moment to come together to help them get, I don't know, back on track or on a different trajectory that's clearer. And the values might be different. I love the ones that you use. And I think that's right. You have to feel a certain way to be able to feel energized and enriched in where you are.
Thank you. And Mansi, you focus on education and training. How does equipping a person, whether it's a customer or an employee, with the right knowledge and skills, anchor their experience, leading to that greater alignment and confidence?
So similar to Natalie, what I'm doing in building out a training program is giving them the blueprint. And anytime you write something down or you document it, it sparks a conversation. And then it's a way for everybody to come together to say, hey, I agree with this. I don't agree with this. And so that brings that alignment. And then also by looking at that process or that sort of that training journey, it gives them engagement because that employee realizes, hey, this is my part in this. And if I don't do this, it really, everything falls apart. If just one employee doesn't do their part, it's not working together. And so I think we all want to belong. So I think part of doing this is understanding what our role or the employee's role is in the whole process. And it gives sort of this greater purpose of I'm doing this for a reason, I'm not doing this just spinning my wheels. So I think sort of getting that purpose is what, in my opinion, matters.
Can I add on to
Yes,
that?
please, Natalie.
I think that one of the things, just to talk about the role clarity piece, teams with high role clarity report 25% higher performance and 30% lower burnout. That's one of them. I thought that was kind of interesting. The other one, companies with high employee engagement deliver 147% higher earnings per share. And I know earlier you touched on the importance of growth. If a company's growing, everybody gets to hopefully, be a part of that growth and feel great. And those are from NetSuite and Forbes, just source wise.
Love that. I honestly, I think we could end the episode on that, but I've got a couple more questions, but it's so well put between the two of you guys. And, Mansi, I love that you bring up purpose because that's another thing that I think is really increasing in terms of what employees expect out of their jobs and their companies is an alignment within the purpose, their purpose, and their individual purpose and the company's purpose. And that's something that, we, similar to you guys, I try to do with my clients as well, but we're not quite done yet. I have a couple more questions, and I try to avoid this topic because everybody's talking about it, but we have to talk about it because we are living in the age of AI. In a time where everyone's talking about AI, I want to talk about people. But I have to ask the question because it is the biggest disruptor on the horizon. So we're seeing a push for AI to automate and personalize experiences at a massive scale. Mansi, starting with you in the world of CX and customer education, how do you see AI being used to create hyper-personalized onboarding and support or hurting it?
with AI, what we've seen so far, and there was a study that was done, I believe it was by Skilljar, which is it's a large LMS company. So they recently did a study that found that in customer education, most of the work with AI is actually for content development. It's not really for content delivery and personalization yet. Now, because in this fast changing world, there's so much that's happening, so many updates, products are changing. So AI is great in sort of content development. So like for example, this is not a plug, but I use the company 11 Labs. They do automated voiceover. So I just started experimenting with them, which I think has been great. And so it's in terms of like saving time. However, there's still some thought and expertise that needs to go into how that experience is being personalized and delivered to whether it's the customer or to the employee. And that still is a very human thing because we still have to understand what they're struggling with, what do they need to know, and all of that information can't be automated. And that just comes from experience. And it's also unique per company. And so really evaluating it case by case still takes thought and strategy.
Natalie?
Yeah, I love what Mansi said. And, leveling, we're thinking about, I guess, CX or EX as a whole. I think what I've observed so far is that companies of different sizes or brands of different sizes have adopted AI in different ways. And depending on how regulated they are or aren't, they have different thresholds for what's possible when you think across the entire journey or what they're comfortable with. So I see it as definitely a way to personalize, to customize. Chewy is a great example of who does it well. I think they're leveraging AI. I don't want to say that they aren't, but just listening to different podcasts, webinars, reading books on the topic as everybody's curious. I think that if you can figure out a way to make it feel personal without it feeling AI-ish in your communication out to employees and customers, and it's not glaringly obvious that you're leveraging AI, then you're going to be more successful because everybody is seeking or seems to be seeking, or many, I should say, or seems to be seeking authenticity and the human connection, both when we're thinking about customers or employees. So that's the hurdle, is your security and how it's feeling to everybody when choosing to adopt.
Yeah.
I love that you brought up Chewy as an example because my guests from this last week also talked about Chewy, and they actually talked about it in great detail in their book that we talked about. But it was also in the context of personalization and kind of where we're at today with AI. So I love that you use the same case study.
Yeah, well, I'm a pet owner, so.
I know, right? Wait, what did you say?
I said I'm a pet owner, so.
Oh, I thought you said you were part owner. I was like, oh my God, you're a part owner of Chewy. That's awesome. Do either of you feel like AI might change the employee journey on the EX side at all, for better or worse? Or do you feel like, similar response to what you said for CX?
Different answer for me. I've noticed with some of even my clients, there's some hesitancy to use AI. And I think to Monsi's point about it being able to speed things up and make certain things faster for us, I think that it in some ways will help employees be able to be more efficient with what they do, streamline certain things, automate connections, make things faster when systems are talking to each other, analyzing data. I could go on and on. I think the use case is so strong for helping employees do their job better and just remove that element of fear and just like give it a go. And then you can use that, the additional thought processing you have on other things.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Nancy,
I would
anything?
agree with that. I look at AI as a tool in the toolbox. It's a tool to really help with certain task-based work, but there's still this personal engagement and high-level thinking, which can't be, you can't automate that because that comes with years of experience, and that can't be replaced. And yeah, if I want to write an email and use AI to write it faster because that saves me time, great. But the content of the email still has to be authentic from the person writing it. And so.
Yeah, well, I think the central thing in all of that is experience, and experience is way too nuanced for AI to really, take over the entirety of it.
Yes.
Right. And I think that's where the human touch is always going to stay, because we need that nuanced perspective to really understand that whole journey. So I always try to leave my listeners with something tangible. And we're getting to the end of the conversation here, so I want to make sure we leave them with something that they can take and maybe apply, tomorrow. So if a leader is listening and they want to start treating their employees as their primary customer, what is the very first, most practical step that they should take? And we can start with Mansi and then Natalie.
So first step is high level, think about what is the experience that we want to give them, and is that experience scoped out somewhere? So do we have it developed? Do we have the training, their onboarding journey? So I'll start specifically with onboarding scoped out. And if not, then let's build it out so that it's, the employee is clear on what the expectations are, but also how, like I mentioned, they feel like they belong as part of that greater company experience.
Yeah, Natalie.
Very good. I'd say yes, everything that Monty said. And also pressure test. Are you listening? Do you know what's happening right now? Do you have a metric and some quotes, and just what do you think the top 3 things are? Go see if you can find that out first, and then put the energy and emphasis into let's, spin this up and get a good sense across our journey and how onboarding feels and all those additional stages. But just open the ears, listen first.
That is so important. Let's take it to kind of the external aspect of that. If somebody that is listening wants to really kind of focus on honing in CX and the customer journey, what's the first kind of practical step that they should take? Let's go let's go the other let's go Natalie, and
we'll go Natalie
Mansi.
first. Yeah.
Thinking, Clarence. Yeah. No.
You can think.
I think that I would say the same. So it's almost like the quick pressure test to say, well, what do you know so far? What are you hearing? What do you know? What are you, from your customer's point of view, what are those current, 1 to 5 friction points that you know? And just see what you're gathering, what you're hearing. And when was the last time you talked to some of your key customers, or the person who decided not to join or whatever it is first, and then figure out what that opportunity is that you're trying to solve for. And it could be high level strategic across everything. It could be, let's just start doing that, and let's just address what we need to now to start turning the wheels and get some, additional revenue in here.
Yeah. Mansi.
Yeah. I agree with everything Natalie said. The one thing I'll add is look at metrics. What are the metrics? Like, what are those NPS scores? What are those product adoption rates? What's your churn rate? And if companies are even capturing that, so that would be a point to even start, if they're not capturing it, to start capturing it, start small.
That's a good starting point.
A good starting point would, just be, onboarding rates or, things like that. So if you don't have the sort of the churn rate, lifetime value, those are sort of big numbers. You look at the longevity, start small, but start measuring, because we can't improve on something until we measure. And so really, if something is failing and the metrics and the numbers are not where you want them to be, then start digging into what can be improved. And in my experience, it always generally comes down to process, or training in the world that I live in. And so then we can really work on improving those.
Yeah. Well, thank you both so much for being here today. This has been such an enjoyable and amazing conversation. I hope you've enjoyed yourselves as well. If looking ahead, what do you both believe is the future of the relationship between employee experience and customer experience? Will the lines between these two disciplines continue to blur, or will they go further into silos? Give me some thoughts.
I think conversations like this, and thank you again for having us here, I think it amplifies it, that it's a real thing, right? Even the role of a chief experience officer, those focused on employee experience, those have grown so much in the last 10, 15 years. Just attention on that is so huge.
Yeah, I would agree. I think the lines are blurring. And I really like what you've said, Clarence, is that the employee is also the customer. And so if we're investing so much time in thinking about the customer, it'd be great to also invest that time in thinking about the employees as well, and making sure that they have a great experience, because they are what makes the company. And so investing in them is investing in the future of the company, is investing in revenue as well.
Yes. Thank you. That is exactly what we needed to say at the end of this episode. If somebody wants to get in contact with you, because we've just barely, in my opinion, barely started to scratch the surface of, both of your expertise and the nuanced understanding that you have for both CX and EX. So, anyone who's listening who might want to have additional help on how to approach CX or how to bridge the gap between the two, what would be the best way to get in contact with you? We'll start with Manasi.
And so they could go to my website, safrela.com, and book a call with me, a 20-minute call with me. We can go over any challenges that you're having, and I can give you a quick game plan, and we can talk through it as well, and they can learn more about me. I also have a newsletter that they can join. So I publish a weekly newsletter where I share tips and strategies on implementing customer education.
Perfect. And Natalie?
Yeah, thank you. Similarly, on my website, the crescentconsultancy.com, there's a way to book 20 minutes with me, or feel free to reach out via email, natalie.jackson at thecrescentconsultancy.com. That's another way to join and get to know me better, and I can learn about you as well.
Thank you, everybody, for joining us. And for those of you who joined and are listening to this episode, I want to leave you with one final thought, and I'm going to bring it back to the beginning of the episode, to this amazing quote from Natalie's website. And something that I think we should all ask ourselves as leaders in organizations, and that's, who are we really serving? We need a clear picture of our customers. We need our teams to provide exceptional service that reflects brand values. And with the data that we have, we need to ask ourselves how we translate those into effective actions. So our hope is that this conversation has shed some light on how to bridge the world of CX and EX to really start to tackle the problem of how we're going to move the workplace to be what we need today, to really better serve our employees and our customers alike. So I hope that you've gained some valuable insight and some, important takeaways. And we'd love to hear your feedback. So make sure to comment, make sure to like, subscribe. And Natalie and Manasi, thank you again so much for joining us for this conversation and for spending your morning with us today.
Thank you so much.